Hi guys, it's me, Chatter HD, and welcome to this full live review of the race for the 2019 Spanish Grand Prix from the Circuit de Catalunya in Catalonia, near, of course, Barcelona in Spain. And yeah, we're going to review everything that happened on race day at the Spanish Grand Prix, go through all the teams and talk about how they ended up finishing where they did, and look at who was good and not so good, and also look at the drivers and constructors standings, and I'll answer some of your questions at the end of this stream. But no matter where you're on the world, guys, hopefully you're doing well after the race has finished. Hopefully you've calmed down, and we're going to have a good hour-long stream. Hopefully some good debate as well. Great to see you all here as always. But let's just go straight into it. And yeah, if you did miss out on what happened at the Spanish Grand Prix, let me now take you through the results of said Grand Prix. So, winning the Grand Prix is Lewis Hamilton from Valtteri Bottas in second, the fifth consecutive Mercedes 1-2. Max Verstappen finishing in third, and then Vettel fourth, Leclerc fifth, Gasly sixth, Magnussen seventh, Sainz in eighth, Kvyat ninth, and Romain Grosjean getting the final point in P10. That's his first point of 2019. And then finishing the race but not scoring points rather is Alexander Albon, who is not driving for McLaren. I think I've got all the team names wrong there. Sorry about that. But yeah, Albon was P11, Ricciardo P12, then Hülkenberg, Raikkonen, Perez, Giovinazzi, Russell, Kubica, Stroll, and Norris. Again, sorry about the teams. I have got that wrong. I forgot to actually edit them. But the time and the drivers in what positions is correct. But there you go. That is the results of the Spanish Grand Prix. And let's now move on to the teams and go through the teams and how they did at this Grand Prix. And let's start off at the top and start off with the Silver Arrows Mercedes, who again finished first and second. And it was a very, very comfortable Grand Prix. Lewis Hamilton, we'll start off with him, beat Bottas down into turn one. And from then on, dominated the Grand Prix, got the fastest lap of the race, which I think is a new lap record, by the way, an 18.4. And yeah, just dominated this Grand Prix. He was untouchable around this track today and led, I believe, every single lap. He was so quick, and his teammate Valtteri Bottas just could not compete with his teammate Lewis Hamilton. And let's go on to what Lewis Hamilton had to say. I'm not going to really analyse Hamilton's race that much because not that much actually happened. He dominated from start to finish pretty much. But this is what he had to say after retaking the lead of the Drivers' Championship. He said, "I have to put it down to this incredible team, this victory. This is history in the making with 5 1-2 finishes in a row. I'm so happy for every one of them. Indeed, this is record-breaking. I believe Mercedes are now absolutely the only team in history to have 5 1-2 finishes in a row. They are easily the class of the field in Formula One. There is no doubt about that. They have the best car. I don't think they have the best power unit. I think that goes to Ferrari in terms of outright power, but everything else Mercedes is the best in." And after that win, Lewis is, of course, back at the top of the Drivers' Championship, but that is his 4th win in Spain, and that is the team's 5th race victory at the Spanish Grand Prix. And they really do own this track in terms of how good they have been in the past few seasons. They're just so good. Let's go on to Valtteri Bottas, though. Bottas at the start did not get a good start. He basically lost out to Hamilton as soon as the clutches were dropped off the line. And then Hamilton had him beat down to turn one. I will say, I think Bottas did well to fend off Vettel, who was trying to go around the outside of him at turn one. So great defensive driving by Valtteri to hold off Sebastian Vettel, even though he did get a bit slidey on the rear end. But after that, kind of like Hamilton, was clearly and dominantly in second place and completed, again, Mercedes' 5th consecutive 1-2. And this is what he had to say after the race finished. I lost out the start, some strange behaviour on the clutch. It kind of seems that way to be honest, because again, as soon as the clutches were dropped off the line, he was already in second place. So there was something wrong with Valtteri's settings or the clutch or whatever. But then goes on to say, as a team, it's incredible. He's talking about, of course, the 1-2 finish for the 5th time in a row, and says, in regards to the Drivers' Championship, I got some good points. Every single point counts. Absolutely. Even though he did not win today, the battle is still going to continue for a long, long time yet. And we're only into, race 5 of a 21 race season. So plenty of time left for Valtteri to reclaim the lead of the championship. But for this team, again, they are easily the best team in Formula 1. And they're going to win. I don't think they're going to win every race this season, but they're going to win almost every race, to be honest. It's hard to see where Red Bull and Ferrari can really beat them. I think Red Bull later in the season at tracks like Mexico or Singapore, I think Red Bull can beat Mercedes at those tracks, but it still will be hard to beat this team who are so good at getting the best result they can possibly get. But now let's go on to Ferrari, who were terrible today in terms of speed, in terms of leadership, in terms of team strategy. They were goddamn awful. Let's start off with Sebastian Vettel. Now, down into turn 1, Vettel locked up, I think, his left front tyre. And that did, I think, hurt his tyre wear in the first stint. But his tyre wear in general was terrible on the soft compound tyres, which I have to say, Ferrari do not like the softer compounds right now in Formula 1, which is a bit surprising considering it used to be the other way round. But yeah, in the first stint, Sebastian was nowhere in terms of speed. He was losing a second a lap to the leader, Lewis Hamilton, up until his pit stop. And yeah, was way, way off the pace of where he should have been in this Grand Prix. Had to let Leclerc through, you have to say, in that first stint, because Leclerc was faster. And I think Ferrari, to be honest, should have made that call a bit earlier, because Leclerc did lose probably 3 or 4 seconds sitting behind Sebastian Vettel. Then Vettel pitted for medium tyres and got back at Leclerc, who went onto the hard tyres. I'll get onto that in a moment. But then, yeah, Vettel was faster than Leclerc, and Leclerc then let Vettel through. Again, it should have happened, but it should have happened earlier than it did. Ferrari, again, wasting critical lap time during the Grand Prix. And then once the safety car came out, that pretty much destroyed any real hope of a podium. Because I think Leclerc was going to go to the end of the Grand Prix with Verstappen and Vettel having to pass Leclerc possibly on track to get that podium. So, yeah, I think Ferrari. I mean, I was expecting Ferrari to be slow today, but I didn't think in the first stint especially they would be that bad. You know, a second off the pace. That was dramatically bad. Even worse than qualifying. So yeah, for Ferrari, just a disaster really. And we'll go on now to Charles Leclerc, who I think basically had the same race to Sebastian Vettel. He was good for one half of the race, but the other half of the race he wasn't good. Leclerc was good in the first half of the race. Was quicker than Vettel and was rightfully let through by Vettel, and then got after Verstappen, but then started to drop time. But then when they pitted Charles Leclerc, he went on to hard compound tyres, which I do not for the life of me understand why they did that. I am actually going to analyse this further tomorrow in tomorrow's incident analysis, because I want to really get deep into how Ferrari's race bit by bit just got worse and more weird and strange in terms of their strategy as the race went on. But clearly, it was a boneheaded move to do that, and I think it cost Leclerc a realistic chance of being, seriously competitive for that podium. But for Ferrari, a disastrous weekend, and it will not get any better at Monaco. In fact, I think at Monaco it might be twice as bad, because at Monaco you need grip. Ferrari doesn't have enough of it. Mercedes and Red Bull will be clearly faster than them in Monaco. I don't have any doubt about that whatsoever. And I honestly think if a Toro Rosso or a McLaren has a very good weekend, Ferrari could be under threat more so from the midfield than themselves going after Red Bull and Mercedes. That's how bad it has got for this team. And I'm going to say again, what area, and I want you guys to answer this in the live chat, what area needs to be fixed the most? Does it have to be, the leadership of the team? Does it need to be just, certain parts in the car? Let me know in the live chat, and I'll read out your comments soon. But this team is so far away from winning a Grand Prix, never mind a World Championship. But now we'll go on to Red Bull. Red Bull were very quick today. As I expected, Max Verstappen did have the pace to get a podium and got what he deserved after a fantastic double pass on Leclerc and Vettel around the outside of turn 3. Great move, and thoroughly deserved to get the podium, as he had the pace throughout the Grand Prix to really cover off Ferrari, and at times was half a pit stop ahead before the safety car, was half a pit stop ahead of the two Ferrari drivers. So for me, Max was great today, and for me is the driver of the day, because he got absolutely everything. He squeezed every drop out of that Red Bull car, as he usually does, as he has done for 2019. And I think you could honestly say that Max Verstappen has been the best driver this season, because he has got the best results possible in basically every race this season. So, great race by Max, and this is what he had to say after the Grand Prix had finished. He said, "It was a hectic first corner, so I backed out of it and ended up getting a good position for lap 1. He's talking, of course, about the first lap. And then goes on to say, "The Mercedes cars were too quick today, but we were still competitive." One thing that was good in this Grand Prix to see from Red Bull is that they have closed the gap to the top. I think they definitely have. I think before this Grand Prix, Red Bull were probably 3/4 of a second off Mercedes in terms of race pace on a normal basis. This weekend, it got down to about half a second. So I think we can see, and I think we have seen this weekend, Red Bull have gained about 1/4 of a second from their upgrades with their car, whether it's aerodynamics, and also the power unit as well, is still coming on strong. So Red Bull, I think now you're going to start to see them really getting after Ferrari, and I would not be surprised one bit if Red Bull beat Ferrari this season. And I think Red Bull will be all over Ferrari in Monaco. I don't see how Ferrari can possibly beat Red Bull in Monaco, considering the amount of grip the Red Bull has over that Ferrari car. So, looking good for Red Bull, and it's kind of expected. We knew they would improve after this Grand Prix, and they definitely have. 1/4 of a second, I believe they have jumped forward. Let's go on to Pierre Gasly. Not that great of a race. I think he did the best he really could have, even though the Red Bull car, I think, was the better race car than the Ferrari. As we've seen this season, Gasly is not exactly getting the best out of that car. But considering how he's done this season, it was all right. At the start, did well to hold his position ahead of the Haases. Was at times a bit close to the Ferraris until they swapped Leclerc ahead of Vettel. Was ahead of Vettel when Vettel pitted for the second time, but then Sebastian got past him. And then after that, except for when he tried to pass Leclerc after the safety car and then almost got passed by Romain Grosjean, I think, in the Haas, or Kevin Magnussen actually it was. Didn't really do anything that spectacular, but definitely this was his best overall weekend of the season so far, because he was closer to Max Verstappen in terms of speed, and was consistently, from qualifying on, in that top 6 where he should be. So I think Pierre did all right, nothing special, but he could have done a lot worse than what he did today. But there are your top teams, guys. Before I go on to the midfield, let me know in the live chat, what do you think of the top teams and how they performed in this Grand Prix? For Mercedes, what do you think about their race? For Ferrari, what do you think about their disaster? Again, a disaster for Ferrari. And for Red Bull, were you impressed by their pace? And do you think Red Bull can close the gap continuously to Mercedes? I hope they can. And I am very excited to see, one, how close they can be to the Mercs at Monaco, which of course is all about grip. But I'm very excited to see how Honda come on around Canada and France with a new power unit. And, you know, an upgraded power unit, more power and stuff like that. I'm interested to see how they come on with that. So, yeah, I think times are looking good for Red Bull, and I want you guys to comment down below, how do you think Red Bull are going to do after this Grand Prix, considering how they have jumped forward. But before I read out your comments, guys, I'll have a quick drink and then I'll get to reading your comments for the next 5 minutes or so. Right. Let's see what you guys have to say. And, well, there's 128 of you. I didn't think there'd be that many here, but thank all of you for being here. And by the way, thank you guys very much for 200 members of the Shazza HDF1 Discord server. Thank you very much for that. We've hit 200 members. Now, let's try and get as quickly as we can to 300. And if you want to build towards 300 and you haven't joined the server, make sure to do so by going into the description, clicking the link to my server and joining that way. It's the best place for notifications for my videos and streams, and it's the hardcore community for my channel. So don't forget to join that. Right, let's see what you guys have to say. Crystal Racing says Red Bull are doing their usual job of improving as the season goes on. Yep, it's not really a surprise, is it, that Red Bull have gained a quarter of a second in the pecking order. Not really that big of a surprise. Daniel XX says Ferrari will leave Ferrari. Ferrari will leave Ferrari. Vettel will leave Ferrari and join Red Bull again, in his opinion. Not too sure about that. Eric Myers says the team at the pit wall lost valuable time twice. They should have let Leclerc pass Vettel much earlier, and later on Vettel destroyed his mediums after being behind Leclerc on the hards for too long. Bang on, my friend. You're absolutely correct. The reason, and it's funny because I'm watching back the race now. They're playing back the race on Sky F1, and I'm currently at the point on lap 8 where Leclerc is being held up behind Sebastian Vettel. It didn't take a rocket scientist to tell that Leclerc was being held up by Sebastian Vettel. And he was behind him for what, 5 laps? They could have done it at least 3 laps earlier. They could have easily done it 3 laps earlier. And that would have saved them probably 2 seconds at most of lap time. And that really could have allowed Leclerc to be closer to Max and be more competitive. And then, of course, the other way round with Vettel and Leclerc. So the pit wall today for Ferrari was honestly god-awful. And that all comes, I'm afraid, from Mattia Binotto. Because he is the team boss. He really makes the final decision when it comes to team orders. It's his decision. It's his call. If he says, Sebastian or Charles, move out of the way for your teammate, then they would have done so pretty quickly. But, you know, that indecision, that lack of leadership is really what cost Ferrari in that moment. But also, you have the poor strategy of putting Leclerc on the hard tyre. If they put Leclerc on medium tyres, you wouldn't have had a second team order situation. So Ferrari just blowing or just shooting themselves in the foot. In fact, not even shooting themselves in the foot, they're shooting themselves in the back of the head with their idiotic decisions, honestly. Gina, can Max get pole in Monaco? I don't know. I'm going to lean towards no. I'm going to lean towards no for now because Mercedes are so good right now. I think Max will be, say, quarter of a second off pole, if you were to ask me right now. But I think definitely Mercedes are going to have a good battle in the race on the hands against Red Bull and mostly Max Verstappen. So in Monaco, I think Red Bull are definitely going to give the Silver Arrows a run for their money. Definitely with Verstappen, maybe with Gasly if the Red Bull is really good. But yeah, we'll see in Monaco. Hopefully, that is the case. Right, let's see if there's any more good comments here. And you know what? I'm going to end on this comment before I go on to the midfield. It's from Francisco Beata, who says strategic team was not replaced. Instead, they replaced Arriva Bene, who did not need to be replaced, and they lost Kimi, who comes in handy when developing the car. Yeah, absolutely. Put it this way. There were other people, there were at least 3 people, key people on that team that deserved sacking more than Arriva Bene after 2017 and 2018 combined. Those 3 people being Sebastian Vettel, Matteo Binotto and Inaki Rueda, because Binotto was in control of the development of the Ferrari and they got it wrong twice in 2017 and 2018 because the car in the latter part of the season got worse. Vettel made too many errors and Inaki Rueda doesn't understand how to conduct a strategy for a Formula 1 team. But no, they sacked Maurizio Arriva Bene and keep all 3. I think that pretty much describes Ferrari for you right now. They don't have a Scooby-Doo what they're doing. But yeah, let's move on to the midfield. If you want to continue with the Ferrari stuff, I'll be doing a Q&A later and then we can get more so into it. But let's now get into the midfield. Renault are basically right now the midfield version of Ferrari, just not good enough. But they're nowhere near as idiotic when it comes to certain areas of their team as Ferrari. But in terms of where they are pace-wise, they are similar to Ferrari in terms of the car just overall is nowhere near good enough to where it should be. The Renault this weekend should be right there with Haas. It should be. People will say, oh, but Haas, you know, they've had a good weekend. I don't care. This is Renault. They're a works team. They got so much money, so many resources, way more than Haas. They have no excuses. None whatsoever. And this weekend has been further proof that that team is really in trouble. And I think they also are going to have to go through something similar to Ferrari, possibly some big changes in management pretty soon, because clearly they are not getting the best results they really should be with the type of personnel they have at that team. So poor for Renault, 12th and 13th. Ricciardo also, actually, you know what, to be honest, I think slightly poor strategy from Renault because they did put Daniel Ricciardo on the hard compound tyre for his second stint. And again, boneheaded decision, you have to say, considering that Giovinazzi was proving it was a bad tyre after he was the first to pit stop. So, yeah, poor decision there. Hülkenberg, I think Hülkenberg did good considering he started from the pit lane. But as a team, you have to say, Renault, nowhere near where they should be. They've took one massive step back with their car and their team. And I don't think at Monaco it will get really any better. I don't think they're going to be that strong. And if they do get points, it'll be like, 10th or 9th. It's not going to be a strong weekend in Monaco for this team. They have serious work to do. And I think they are really in trouble right now. Next up, though, is McLaren. By the way, one last thing on Renault, which is to do with McLaren. Renault are literally a B team to McLaren right now. That is literally the case. McLaren had a good race today. It was a bit up and down at times. Carlos Sainz, will start off with him. Had a good start. Held off Ricciardo nicely enough for a long time. Did get passed by Ricciardo, but then got past Ricciardo just after the first round of pit stops. And then once the safety car came out and then came back in, of course, he then got after Danny Kvyat, passed him on the restart, then passed Romain Grosjean, and finished up in P8. A very good result for Carlos Sainz. Lando Norris, I don't actually know what happened to Norris at the start, but he lost 6 positions for some reason. But yeah, there you go. He dropped to 16th, hovered around in the lower bits of the field, pitted, and then tried to get past Lance Stroll in turns 1 and 2. And in turn 2, the two connected. Now, I'll get on to who was at fault tomorrow, even though I've kind of revealed that anyway. But yeah, for Norris, poor race. The start basically ended what could have been a decent race if he didn't have such a bad start. But for Carlos Sainz, great result. Very good for McLaren. That's a great result for them going forward. And by the way, McLaren are still P4 in the constructors going into Monaco. I think Monaco will be kind of the same in terms of where position or what position they're in qualifying of the race. It won't be that great in quali. They'll be better in the race. Might nick a point or two. I think Monaco will be all right for McLaren. I think as long as they get, say, a top 9 finish, that would be good enough for them. But yeah, a good race for McLaren in terms of the points that they have scored. And I think they're actually pulling away at the front of the midfield pack in terms of the constructors' standings. So looking good for McLaren going forward. Alfa Romeo next. Terrible race. Kimi Räikkönen went off at turn 4 on the first lap because he carried too much speed into turn 4. That pretty much ended his Grand Prix because he was at the back or near the back for most of the race, or almost all of the race. So his race was destroyed by his over-eagerness in turn 4. Giovinazzi had a decent start, then pitted for the hard tyre on lap 7 to go for a gamble that did not work and actually meant that he had no chance of scoring any points. And I think if he actually stayed out on the soft tyre, he might have nicked a point with where he was on track. So yeah, also poor there from Alfa in terms of strategy, but you have to say Alfa, I think, also have took a bit of a step back with their car. Their car and their performance this weekend is worse than what I thought it would be. Alfa going into Monaco not looking good, and I don't think Alfa at Monaco are going to do well because I don't think that car currently is the type of car that can do well at that track. So not looking good for Alfa Romeo. Next up is Haas, who had quite an eventful race after the safety car came in. But was looking good up until the safety car. They were P7 and P8. Kvyat did pass Magnussen a few laps before the safety car, but was still looking good in 7th and 9th. Then the safety car came out. Magnussen jumped Kvyat in the pit stop somewhere. I don't know how he did that, but he did. And then on the restart, Magnussen tried to pass Grosjean, went down the inside, got the move done, but his rear tyre touched Roman's front right. Roman went off, K-Mag got the position, and then the fighting between the Haas cars begun. Grosjean tried to pass him again, and it didn't work. I think he tried another time as well, and again it didn't work and went off the track so many times at turn 1 on that escape road down into turn 2 and 3. Then Grosjean got passed by Carlos Sainz, then Kvyat, and then was very lucky to finish ahead of Alexander Albon. But I have to say, if I'm going to criticise Ferrari for poor leadership, I've got to say the same for Haas. Why did they let them race like that when they could have ended up scoring 10 points in P7 and P8 if they allow or didn't allow those drivers to race? Because I honestly think if they just held position, they would have most likely beat Sainz, Kvyat and Albon as a team anyway. So I don't understand why Haas let them race like that when they blew probably 3 points, and that might be key at the end of this season. It really could be. So I don't get what Haas were doing there. Poor leadership from the pit wall in my opinion. But at least for them, they're back into scoring points. They are now, by the way, Haas, joint 6th in the constructors, I believe, with Alfa Romeo. So now they're really back into that that fight for 4th. They're still about 10 points behind McLaren, who are 4th, but that's gettable with the races that are coming up, especially a race like Canada. So Haas are back at it, and hopefully their car can maintain this sort of pace at most races going forward, because if they can, then they might be able to get 4th if they can get some consistency going together. Yeah, there's Haas. Next up, Toro Rosso. I think Toro Rosso had a good race, really a good weekend for them. Danny Kvyat finishing in P9 where he qualified. I think Kvyat, honestly, probably deserved to finish at the front of the midfield. He was very good in the race, put a great pass on Kimi Raikkonen around the outside of 4. Passed Magnussen well down into turn 1 for P8 at the time. And I think Kvyat honestly did have the pace and did deserve to finish at the front of the midfield. So disappointing there, but at least he still finished in P9, was only just behind Carlos Sainz at the end of the Grand Prix. Alexander Albon, I think, will definitely be disappointed that he's not grabbing a point, and I think he kind of did deserve to nick a point. I think the reason he didn't was because he was never really in the right part of the track or in the right position at the right time. I think if he maybe had a better start and gained an extra position, maybe that could have been the difference. But yeah, Albon, I think, slightly unlucky that the race ended when it did, because I think if we had 5 more laps, I think Albon would have beat Grosjean to that final point. Good race for Toro Rosso, and I'm going to be honest, I think they have not massively stepped forward, but I think they have made a small step forward with their car. And I think in Monaco, they could end up having the best car in the midfield, because normally Monaco is great for them, and I think they are going to be super strong in Monte Carlo. The last team in the midfield, Racing Point. Well, what was the point for Racing Point today? They had no pace. They were kind of like Alfa Romeo, except I'd say they were better with their pace. Not massively, but they were better. But yeah, Racing Point, a very forgettable race. Sergio Perez finishing down in 15th place. And then Lance Stroll having the crash he did with Norris. I think Stroll is at fault. I want to see more replays just in case there was something I missed. So I'm not confirming that absolutely. But I think from what I've seen so far, Stroll definitely is at fault for that crash, because he turned in when Norris had half of his car alongside, and that's enough for me for the driver behind to deserve space. So yeah, disappointing for Racing Point. And going into Monaco, I don't think things are looking that great for them. I know last year they were good, but I think that was kind of a one-off. I think for this Monaco Grand Prix, they are kind of going to be like Alfa. They're going to struggle to get a point, because it seems as though Racing Point have took a step back, kind of like Renault, but not as big, I think, a step back. So yeah, not great for Racing Point, but let's be honest, we weren't expecting the greatest race for them anyway. And finally is Williams. Yeah, they finished at the back. Nothing really to talk about with them. And let me now, before I go on to the Q&A, I'm going to go through the driver standings. And I'll also read out the constructors, even though I don't have the graphic for that. So this is the driver standings. Lewis Hamilton leads by 7 points from Valtteri Bottas. Max Verstappen gets up to third ahead of Sebastian Vettel, Charles Leclerc in fifth. Gasly now clearly in sixth for now. Then Magnussen has jumped up to seventh. Then it's Perez, Raikkonen and Norris, even though he had a poor race today. So those are your driver standings after the Spanish Grand Prix. And the constructor standings, I believe, are Mercedes about 100 points clear of Ferrari. Ferrari are second. Red Bull are, I think, around 30 points behind. Red Bull have gained a point on Ferrari after today's Grand Prix. Fourth is McLaren. Fifth is Racing Point. Joint sixth, I think, is Haas and Alfa Romeo. Then eighth is Renault. That's absolutely shocking. And then ninth is Toro Rosso, and 10th, of course, is Williams. Actually, let me just think. So Renault scores 6 points in Australia, another 6 in Shanghai. So Renault are on 12 points. And how many points are Toro Rosso on? They got 1 in Australia, 2 in Bahrain, so that's 3, then 4. So Toro Rosso are about half the amount of points Renault have behind. So Toro Rosso at the moment are slowly but surely catching Renault. Imagine if Renault dropped back down to P9. That'd be so embarrassing. But yeah, there you go. That is my review of the race. But guys, for the next 15 minutes, make sure to put in your best questions in the live chat and in the comments, and I'll read or reply to as many as I can. Yeah, make sure to do that, and I'll go through as many as I can. I just want to say though, don't forget to subscribe for more content like this, as I do race watch-alongs, qualifying watch-alongs, practice watch-alongs, and reviews of qualifying and the race itself every Grand Prix weekend. And we will be doing the same for Monaco in a fortnight's time, so don't forget to subscribe for that. Bottom right of the screen, you can do it right there, or go to my homepage, subscribe and hit the notifications bell. And don't forget as well to hit this video with a like. Let me just have a quick drink, and then I'll get to your comments in just a moment. Right, so let's see what you guys have for me. Ultraman says road to 4K subs. Yeah, we're not far away. We're not far away at all. I think we're only 50. No, not 50. More like 70 away from 4K. So hopefully, guys, before Monaco, we can get to 4K. And of course, the end of year target is 6K. Not 6K, 10K. There's 6K to go until 10K, of course, from 4K. So yeah, I think we're doing well, and I've actually looked at my social blade, which does like predictions on where or how many subs you'll have or views you'll have in a certain amount of time based on your current data. And right now, it says we'll hit 5K right around Silverstone, and then 10K around the Brazilian Grand Prix. So we are getting there. Let's keep going, guys, and we will get to 10K, which is again the end of year target. Let me just by the way, no, I'm not hating on Stroll. Jesus Christ. For me, he was at fault. If half a car's alongside you and you turn in, that's your fault. You should be looking in your mirrors. And he clearly knew he was there because he defended. So no excuses. Right, let me look at some, if there's any comments in the chat. Nib saying how nonsense. I don't know what he's talking about there. But let me just find the start of these questions, and then we'll get on to answering them. Right, we'll start off with Mr. Random Guy. Do you think Alfa will be the second slowest in Monaco? Right now, I'd have to say, yeah, probably. Because they don't have, right now, as good a car in terms of aerodynamics as McLaren, Renault, Toro Rosso, and probably Haas. Racing Point and Alfa right now are pretty close in terms of performance. And I think they're both going to struggle at Monaco. So, yeah, probably. I think the next time you'll see Alfa really back at it is Canada. I think Canada, Alfa will be back at it and will probably get a point or something like that. So if you are an Alfa fan or a Kimi Raikkonen fan, Canada is most likely to be your next good Grand Prix. Right, let me find some more here. Motorsport Tube, is Kvyat in your top 5 drivers so far this year? He is in my top 5. I'd have to think about it. I think Hamilton, Bottas, Verstappen and Raikkonen would have to be in my top 5. And then after that, maybe Perez, I'd say, ahead of Kvyat. But I think Kvyat is probably in the top 10 best drivers this season, for sure. Right, let me find some more here. Simon Troop, do you think Red Bull win in Monaco? They can, if they get absolutely everything out of their car in Monaco, and they can just maximize every single opportunity, then I think they can. But I wouldn't say it's a likely thing to happen like it was last year. I hope Red Bull are right there with Mercedes, but I get a feeling that Mercedes will still have the better car, but I hope I'm proved wrong. But Red Bull will definitely be close with Max Verstappen to pole and probably the race win. So expect a strong Grand Prix for Red Bull. Do you think Ferrari are under serious threat from the midfield in Monaco? That's Mr. Random Guy. I don't think so. I think maybe I exaggerated, but what I'm trying to say is they'll be closer to the midfield than they will be, or closer to the front of the midfield than they will be to pole position. And because Monaco is a small lap or a small track in terms of how long it takes to do a lap time, I think Ferrari will be closer to a team like, say, Toro Rosso or McLaren than they will be to Mercedes on pole, because Ferrari don't have the grip to be as good as Mercedes and Red Bull. And I think, honestly, the Toro Rosso chassis and aero is not even massively far off what Ferrari have. Honestly, I don't think it's massively far off. It's definitely comfortably behind, but it's not night and day, honestly, especially at that track. So maybe they'll be, I don't know, 3/10 ahead of the front of the midfield, but they won't be within 3/10 of pole. No way. No way at all. They might even be a second off pole with the way they've been. Crystal Racing says Stroll is just meh in general. I'll leave that comment to you. Jose Manuel San Roman Civent. Hopefully I pronounced that long name right. Albon, he says, Albon seems to be more cautious and tends to be consistent with race points / near race points despite today's performance. Do you think Kvyat can keep up his good work, or will he have racing incidents? Thing with Kvyat is one of those. Kvyat's kind of not as good, obviously, as Max Verstappen, but he's, say, a slower, just as aggressive version of Max Verstappen, except that Kvyat tends to have more crashes than Max, and Kvyat just doesn't have anywhere near as much speed that Max does. But yeah, he's kind of a midfield version of Max. When he goes for moves, he goes aggressive, he goes bold, and it's either going to work out brilliantly or he's going to have a massive crash and most likely be at fault for it. If Kvyat can be consistent, I think Kvyat could end up finishing, I don't know, 10th or 11th in the Drivers' Championship, but it's hard, honestly, to ask Danny Kvyat to be consistent. Chazza, oh, this is from Sebastian, says, hi Chazza, how do you feel about Ferrari? As usual, I'm critical of Ferrari because I think today was a dumb race from them. But I want to know what you think, because I know you're at the race, or were at the race this weekend. So I want to know what you thought of them. Let me know what you thought. Robert says Ferrari need a similar front wing like Mercedes and Red Bull. Even Haas looks faster than Ferrari in slow corners. I have said this before. I said it, a week or two ago, and I'll say it again. That front wing design Ferrari have, which is radical compared to what Red Bull and Mercedes have, is what is causing the majority of the issues. It's too radical, and it's not giving them the grip they need. They need to go the Red Bull or Mercedes route in terms of the look and really the design of that front wing, because it's not working for them. It's not working for them. Their car has quite bad understeer compared to the Mercedes, and in the slower corners, you need a good front end. You absolutely do. If you don't have a good front end in slow corners, you're going to lose time all the time. Having a good rear end is for the fast corners. And the Ferrari rear end is pretty good. In the fast corners, they do tend to have a good car. But in the medium to slow speed corners where you need the front downforce, they don't have it. So I think their issues really start with their front wing. And if they can get that sorted, then they should be closer. But this is Ferrari. They don't tend to sort out issues very quickly. Nib says, thing is, Robert, you can't just change the front wing. To change the front wing, you have to change the whole car. True. But, well, Ferrari have got, another 16 races to go. It's not like they're in a title fight. I think they've got plenty of time to bring some kind of, I don't know, B car or something. I wouldn't be against that, Ferrari bringing a B car. I think, honestly, that would be the only way they'd be able to absolutely compete for race wins on a consistent basis, is if they had a completely new car, a B car, like Haas have basically brought to this Grand Prix, and like McLaren brought to the Spanish Grand Prix last year, even though McLaren's B car didn't work. So I think, honestly, the only way Ferrari can solve it is bringing a B car. If they don't do that, then they might as well just start focusing development on 2020 and then alter the design and do things differently in a better way for that season. Let me just look at some more comments here. Faust asks, what upgrades do you think Ferrari needs to at least get competitive going into the rest of the season? Again, front downforce, that's what they need. If they're not going to bring a B car, but they're not going to focus on 2020, all they can really do is just gradually improve the front aerodynamics of the car. So they've got to focus on that area, because I think the rear end of the car is fine. I think the power unit is the best in Formula 1 in terms of outright power. Maybe not reliability, but power, it's the best. Because if you go back and look at the mini sectors in qualifying between Bottas and Hamilton, in any part of the track where you need high acceleration, the Ferrari was faster. But anywhere where you needed to slow down quite a bit or somewhat in a medium or slow speed corner, Ferrari were quite a bit slower. And I think that pretty much sums up where their car is not working. Right, let me find a few more comments here and then I'll get on to the end of the stream. And also, guys, make sure to stick around, because I'm going to let you guys know as to the plan of content between now and Thursday practice in Monaco. Of course, practice in Monaco takes place on a Thursday because it's a commercial day on the Friday. Sarah Lee, do you think the hope for Max breaking all the records has gone now, as he has had 5 years with equipment that's not been quite there? Example, not example, etc. I think she's saying. He hasn't even got a pole yet when he deserves to. Times he messed up. You have to remember, though, Max Verstappen is still 21 years old, I think. Lewis Hamilton wasn't even in Formula 1 at 21. And Verstappen's had, what, 6 race wins or 5 race wins, something like that? The Max has still done very well for a 21-year-old in Formula 1. I think he will be in Formula 1 for at least another 15 years. I disagree. I think still we need to give them time. I mean, if Red Bull and Honda really get, motoring on, no pun intended, why can't Max be a world championship contender in a year's time or 2 years' time? Because right now, Red Bull are not that far off Mercedes in race pace, where Red Bull always tend to show their best form. And of course, where the points are scored. If they can continue to close that gap, I don't think he's that far away from being a consistent, first and second and third place runner. I don't think he's that far away at all. Right, let me find, I don't know, a couple more. There's so many good questions here, so thank you guys for asking. Jerome Owen asks, do you think Lewis will win his 6th world title this season? Yes, I think he will. He's in the best car, and he is better than Valtteri Bottas, and I think he can handle Bottas's best form. So, yeah, I think Lewis will win his 6th world title. Whether he'll win his 7th in 2020, I think really does depend on the competition. And also does depend on how Red Bull and Honda continue to improve. Because you cannot doubt, out of the top teams, Red Bull are the ones that are really not amazing or anything, but they are improving probably the most. Mercedes are still great, but I don't think they've massively jumped forward with their car. I think their car would have been this great here anyway, even if they didn't bring a mass amount of new parts. They would have still beat Ferrari and Red Bull, I think, in qualifying. Right. I'll find one more comment, and then we will come to the end of the stream. By the way, AN, who says, who cares about poles? It's all about wins. Exactly. I don't think pole position records really matter. I honestly care about race records because points are scored on a Sunday, not Saturday. So it doesn't matter if he ends up not having that many poles, but tons of race wins. There's Max Verstappen. Right, let me find, and I'll answer that one from Simon Troop. Do you think F1 will be in Barcelona in 2020? Well, if you listen to the president of the track, yes, because he said there's a 90% chance of a Grand Prix at Barcelona in 2020. I think Barcelona will be on the calendar. I think if Zandvoort comes to the calendar in 2020, which is not certainty because they have to renovate that track if it's going to be ready for Formula 1. Because not only is the track not wide enough, the fan areas are not sustainable for a Grand Prix. They're not sustainable at all. And also, the roads leading to the track, they're not ready to handle the amount of traffic you will have on a Grand Prix weekend. So, I think Zandvoort has some work to do. But if Zandvoort is on the calendar in 2020, I think it will be added alongside the Spanish Grand Prix. And we are going to have, I think, probably a 22 race calendar at most in 2020, because Mexico is, I think, definitely off the calendar because the Mexican government have pulled funding for the Grand Prix after this year. Vietnam is confirmed, and if Zandvoort comes, that'll be 22, but if it doesn't, it'll remain at 21 and the calendar will be absolutely fine. Yep, there you go. But guys, thank you for coming along for this review of the Spanish Grand Prix of 2019. But before I start plugging all my social medias and all that stuff, I just want to let you guys know as to what the plan of content is between now and Thursday practice in Monaco. So this is the plan. Incident analysis video for the Spanish Grand Prix will be uploaded tomorrow at 12 PM UK time, where I'm going to analyse the Ferrari strategy and team orders. I'll look at Verstappen's pass on Vettel around the outside of turn 3. I'll look at the contact between Stroll and Norris, and I'll probably look at the Grosjean stuff at the end of the race as well. But definitely the Norris, Stroll, Ferrari and Verstappen on Vettel stuff I'll definitely cover in that video coming out tomorrow at 12 PM UK time. Then the next video after that will be on Thursday. That video will be a video similar to that Ferrari video I did about a week ago, where I looked at how Ferrari's 2019 is already a disaster. I'm going to do a similar-ish video to that, but this time it will be Renault who will be the focus in that video. Then, next Saturday at 3 PM UK time, Nib will be back on the channel for the podcast, live at 3 PM, where we're going to do a bit about the Spanish Grand Prix, because of course he hasn't given his thoughts yet, so I'll let him, talk about what happened. And also, we will do the first full early preview for the 2019 Monaco Grand Prix in a fortnight's time. Then, there are 2 more videos that are going to come out between that podcast next Saturday and Thursday practice. One will be This Week in F1, which is my news show, which will cover the news from next week in Formula 1. And then me and Nib are going to do a special video where we're going to look at all the tech updates from the Spanish Grand Prix and analyse every part of every car. Well, not every single part, but, front wing, side pods and barge boards and rear end as well. We're going to do as much as possible, and I'll try to get that out before Thursday practice in Monaco. If I don't get it out before Monaco, I'll probably upload it on the day off on the Friday. But that is what is coming up on the channel between now and Monaco, and it would be great to have you as a subscriber and a viewer for those videos. So don't forget to subscribe and hit the notifications bell for that content. Like this video, comment down below what you thought of this video, and comment down below what do you think of the Spanish Grand Prix in 2019 and what my opinions were of the Grand Prix. As well, don't forget to join my Discord. Again, thank you guys so much for 200 members in that server. If you want to get it towards 300, make sure to join the server, link below in the description. It's the best place for notifications, my videos and streams, and it is the hardcore Chazza HD F1 community. And don't forget as well to follow me on Twitter at Chaz6110. And check out my website, chazzahd.com. But guys, until my next video tomorrow at 12 PM UK time, continuing the analysis from this Grand Prix. And until the next Grand Prix on the calendar, the 2019 Monaco Grand Prix from the streets of Monte Carlo, it has been me, Chazza HD. Goodbye.